Arizona is enjoying record population growth, one of the fastest growing U.S. states. More than 7 million people here now. Using so much water here in the desert, scientists predict a 50% loss in water supply here in the next few years.
Give you that?
And some residents like Frank Avril and Lee Harris are already running out of water. Not the life they dreamed of in the beginning. They had a fairy tale wedding not long ago with Frank playing the oboe for Lee in Sedona.
Monsoon here is amazing.
They found their dream home, they say, north of Phoenix and Scottsdale in the desert community of Rio Verde foothills. A remote place where residents historically paid water trucks to bring them their water. The trucks getting their water from the city of Scottsdale a few miles away, from this standpipe, until Scottsdale pulled the plug and shut off the water, cutting off the water supply to Rio Verde foothill residents. To conserve water, the city says, during drought, forcing residents like Lee and Frank to collect rainwater to survive. Because they live outside the city limits of Scottsdale, no longer having access to Scottsdale water. Lee warns anyone living in the drought-plagued western United States that their lives too could just as easily be upended like hers and Frank's.
The question for every homeowner who lives out west is how to be prepared and how to absorb the shock of what's going to be coming their way. All of the road office. Because everyone is going to feel the hurt sooner or later.
So much UV light.
When it happens, it's going to hit hard.
Many properties up here in Rio Verde foothills have historically been quite affordable for middle-class homeowners who have million-dollar views but are by no means millionaires themselves. Property taxes in remote communities like this are also lower than living in the city. However, given the current water shortage, few residents here are finding anyone interested now in buying their homes. What water that can be collected must also be preserved to fight fires here, which can be frequent and challenging considering firefighters are not as close by as in cities. There are about 1,000 homes here in Rio Verde foothills. Half of them have water underground in water wells. The other half have water storage tanks above ground like these, or below ground tanks like this monster being delivered and about to be put into the ground at someone's property here. And then the water haulers pump water from their tanks on their trucks into the water tanks of homeowners. The source of the water, as previously mentioned, was Scottsdale, Arizona, which gets it mostly from the Colorado River. The thing is, Scottsdale for years has been warning the public that this water standpipe was going to be shut off to Rio Verde foothills residents, primarily because of drought. And the shutoff finally happened in January of 2023. As a result, water haulers like John Hornewer must drive almost 2 hours away to find the next available water standpipe, dramatically increasing his cost of doing business, he says, that he now must pass on to residents here. So average monthly water bills are increasing from $100 a month to $400 a month. And for residents with horses and other livestock, their water bills are as high as $1,500 a month. Some no longer able to provide water for their animals that have been euthanized.
This is a very, very serious situation. People are having to put their animals down to be able to afford the increase in the cost of water.
Water costs that are simply not affordable or sustainable for residents like Lee and Frank, who, like most residents up here, live on a fixed income. Their whole lives now, they say, basically seem to revolve around collecting jugs and buckets of water when and if it rains enough and flows down off the roof of their home.
And when it comes down to washing hands, at least you can do it with some soap. but no hot water. And so that's the only downside of it.
Lee says she has to shower elsewhere now if she wants a hot shower.
It's at a fitness club that a friend belongs to. She's arranged for me to be able to take showers there twice a week.
The toilets in the house, they can now only be flushed once a day to save water.
We're going to only be able to flush once a day and twice if in an emergency. But I can tell you that getting used to smelling that, it really does start to stink. Now, I do have little bits of chlorine bleach. I, put a couple of drops in the toilet bowl, and that, a certain amount takes care of it. But it really does start to smell after a while, and you just have to have a lot of air freshener, and you got to keep the lid closed. And you have to take it into account that this is the price you pay for staying in your own home.
Under these circumstances.
Under these circumstances.
And then the other thing is choosing what you buy as groceries that doesn't require a lot of water.
One of our favorite dishes used to be spaghetti. And we're not able to have minced spaghetti anymore unless we want to make it with rainwater, and I'm not so sure I'm ready for that yet. And whatever we collect or recollect, we go ahead and use in the toilets to flush. That way we're using water 2-3 times,
So, no, in fairness, though, we don't have children, young children at least. But there are, of course, in this area, families with multiple children, 4 children, sometimes more, grandchildren, elders staying with them, livestock, pets.
And speaking of pets, meet the neighbor's dog, Leia, named after Princess Leia. Every morning, taking her owner, Kathy Cox, out to feed the quail. Leia putting on quite a show when Kathy tosses the birdseed. Kathy and her husband, Russell, say their water bill went from $130 a month to nearly 4 times that amount.
I can handle $130 a month for water, but now I'm talking over $400 a month just for water.
So Russell says they spent a small fortune putting in a rainwater recovery system around the house to collect rainwater. And even with that, he says they still need to conserve water, keeping toilet flushing and water usage down to a bare minimum.
I didn't want to spend the $15,000 we ended up spending, but we started with rain gutters all the way around the house. That was the first step. And once we did that, we set tanks up. We have piping that comes off the gutters and goes into the tanks to collect the rainfall. And we currently have 2 500-gallon tanks, one 2,700-gallon tank, and I have another one I'm waiting for. And we have our in-ground tank that the builder provided. So when I'm through, I'm gonna have a little over 11,000 gallons of storage capacity.
Russell and Kathy say when they bought this place a couple years ago, they knew nothing about Scottsdale's plan to shut off their water supply, and that the builder of their home failed to mention anything about it.
It is my understanding that there had been discussions about Scottsdale shutting off the standpipe for the water haulers for a number of years, and that was not disclosed to us.
It's not fair to the people who are buying, because we probably never would have bought this lot had we known.
I'm frustrated that the laws of Arizona allow that to happen without the builder having to disclose that information up front.
Scottsdale City Councilwoman Solange Whitehead confirms that private home builders here, known as wildcat builders, that build 5 or fewer homes in one subdivision, like here in Rio Verde Foothills, are not required by law to guarantee residents they will have water.
In Scottsdale, when a family buys a house, they're guaranteed 100 years worth of water. And that is not a protection that people like Rio Verde Foothills residents have. So today, we have home builders building homes and selling homes that have no assured water. That is simply a legal loophole that must stop. the county and the state government have allowed this loophole to remain legal. Unregulated growth and the loophole allowing builders to build and sell homes without assured waters created this crisis and continue to deepen the crisis.
A possible solution to this water crisis comes from a water management company from Canada called EPCOR that recently bought out private U.S. companies previously managing water in parts of Arizona. EPCOR has suggested installing a new water standpipe near Rio Verde foothills. However, Rio Verde foothills falls under the government authority of Maricopa County, and county officials recently announced the county has no authority over water rights in this region.
The county doesn't have any water authority. The county doesn't have any water rights.
Other potential solutions or remedies, says EPCOR, include raising the nearby Bartlett Dam to capture and preserve more water, building a desalination plant on the Sea of Cortez in Mexico and piping water to Arizona, and desalinating brackish water supplies inside the state. Something has to be done, says state water officials, who estimate Arizona could lose 50% of its water supply in the next few years. Arizona State Representative Alexander Colodin, who represents Rio Verde foothills residents, recently dropped a bombshell claiming Arizona state officials for years have avoided informing the public that the entire state of Arizona is most likely running out of water, not just in Rio Verde foothills, not just in the city of Scottsdale, everywhere in the state, including the Phoenix metro area and its 5 million water consumers. He claims few state leaders believe Arizona has 100 years of water left, and that most remain silent because it's not good for business to talk about how bad the water supply situation is in Arizona.
This entire state's been burying our heads in the sand. We're believing what we want to believe. The 100-year rule is you've got to have a 100-year supply on paper. Well, there's a difference between water on paper and water in the ground. And there's been a report that 2 successive gubernatorial administrations have sat on, one Democrat, one Republican, that's supposed to tell us how much water is actually in the ground for the Phoenix metro area. I think there's a reason they've both sat on it, and I think the reason is it wouldn't be good for business if it got out. Because it would say that there's not as much water in the Phoenix metro area as people would think, and if you're going to move your home here or your business here and there's not that supply of water, that might affect your decision. Because right now business is flowing in, people from California are flowing in, and they're flowing in because we're saying to everybody, we got plenty of water, we're stable, we got the stable water supply, and people rely on that. I just don't think it's true, though.
Water hauler John Hornuler says Rio Verde foothills is just one example of the communities that will be suffering from water shortages in the years to come as prolonged drought conditions plague the western United States.
We're essentially the first domino to fall, and this is very serious. This is a community of people who are really suffering. You wouldn't think it. It seems to be an affluent community, and you just wouldn't think that in 2023 people would be actually having water woes here in the United States. But no, this is real. Property values have plummeted.
John says he fears a water war has already begun here in the West. Predicted, he says, long ago during America's Wild West days in the 1800s by American author Mark Twain, who famously said, "Whiskey is for drinking and water is for fighting."
That saying, whiskey is for drinking and water is for fighting, that is no joke.
It's everywhere. I mean, if anybody that's not living under a rock will see that there's a water issue nationwide.
Lee Harris and Frank Gavril say this is not the life they dreamed of when they got married. That their beautiful beginning in their dream home would come down to them having no sustainable water supply. Not the American dream, says Lee, she had in mind.
I'm taking a look at the world and what is coming apart in the world. When I think of what is happening here, I think of us just being the start of the ball of yarn coming undone. It's not what we all grew up with and have known in America since the end of World War II. Most of us have had, water available to us through urban areas and even in rural areas. But it's coming undone now, and that's mainly because of climate change and other factors of not good planning, especially for the West. And so I think to myself, yeah, this really sucks. It stinks. That's more applicable. It stinks that this is happening.